Welcome to LinkedIn Live with personal brand authority, Lida Citroen. Lida is an award-winning executive coach, speaker, and author working with clients in over 30 countries. She helps professionals, entrepreneurs, and business leaders manage the way they're perceived by the people who matter most. From leadership development, executive presence, to strategic communications and social media positioning, Lida's work is thoughtful, motivating, and practical. Get ready for a great program. Here's Lida.
Well, hello. Here we are again, and I hope you're as excited about today's program as I am. I know we have folks joining us from all over the world, and if you've watched my LinkedIn Lives before, you know one of my favorite parts is when you type into the chat where you're dialing in from, what corner of the planet, what country, what state in the United States or city are you dialing into this program today? Go ahead and put that in the chat and we'll get started. So, like many of you, I jumped onto social media pretty early. And maybe you were a late adopter, maybe you were an early adopter like myself, but I was intrigued by the idea of what could happen on social media. We knew that there were a lot of people using social media and building online influence to find a better job or position themselves for more career success. Maybe you were using it to stalk your ex or share a recipe. Whatever the reason you were on, we all sort of figured out this social ecosystem together early on. And I know for myself, when I started my business in 2008, I was coming into a completely new conversation. Personal branding, the specialty I was launching into, was not talked about like it is today. So 15 years ago, social media was this way that I could learn and connect and collaborate with other people. I remember probably in one of the earlier posts that I shared, I was asking some questions about a piece of the methodology I was building that I was stuck on. And a gentleman clear across the world, I think he was in the UK, sent me a white paper that he had written on that piece of methodology. He just sent it to me, this complete stranger who he didn't know, who was sitting in Denver, Colorado, trying to build a business. And it showed me the power of connection, the power of engagement, but I also learned the importance of reciprocity. Because not only had he gifted me this important tool, but there was an understanding and an expectation that I would gift something in return. So I had to find a way to say thank you and to show him value back. And it was my job to do that. Two very important parts of the social media online influence process. Well, it's a lot of what we're going to unpack today. And I don't want to take too much time with this intro, but I want to leave you with a few thoughts that you can think about as Michael Quinn and I talk about building online influence. First, you do have to be engaged. You can't just create a LinkedIn profile, sit back and expect the phone to start ringing and the messages to start coming in. You have to have a strategy for engaging with other people. It's important to have a goal. Why are you spending time on social media? Why are you using the platforms, whatever they are, to build your reputation, to advance your voice? What is your strategy for that? All of the things that come with a strategy get baked in to an online influence strategy. And there's a point, and I know Mike and I will talk about this, there's a point that I really want to hone in on, and that is the difference between authenticity and transparency. And if you've ever heard me teach or write, you've read any of my stuff before, you know that this is a big deal for me. Because I think when we are authentic, it means we're being genuine. Somebody asks us a question and we decide to answer, we're giving a truthful answer. But transparency, the way I define it, especially in social media, transparency is telling everything and everybody everything, right? Every hope, every dream, every fear, every rash you've ever had gets shared. I'm not a fan of that. I think as adults, as human beings, we're allowed to have private thoughts. We're allowed to have private experiences. We have traumas. We have regrets. We have things in our past or opinions that we don't feel we have an obligation to share with everyone. So I do want to sort of bring up the idea of you have to be authentic on social media. You have to be the same person that you would be if I met you in person, but you don't have to tell people every single thing about you. And the last, and this doves into what we're going to talk about, is that your online brand in particular is what I, as your connection, believes is true about you. It's how I learned to trust you. It's how I learned to see your value. And that is why I'm so excited to have the guest that we're going to have today, because I've followed, like many of you, Michael Quinn for years. His commentary, his thoughtfulness, his outspokenness have built a reputation for him. And it is what I knew before I even met him in person. So without any further ado, I want to introduce our guest today. For 24 years, retired Sergeant Major Michael Quinn led our nation's soldiers as a military intel officer. And even still today, if you know him, you know he has a huge heart for serving the veteran community. A two-time LinkedIn top voice with more than 374,000 followers. I didn't know it went that high. Michael's post-military career led him to Ernst & Young as a senior manager, and then ultimately led him to starting his firm, Hire Military, which focuses on connecting military veterans, service members, and military spouses with industry. So helping those talent get placed. Today, he teaches the power of LinkedIn to general and flag officers from all branches of the service as part of the service transition courses. He leads 50 plus webinars, live events, and in-person workshops a year to transitioning service members. I thought I was busy. This guy makes me look like a slacker. And he was a multi-year member of the Forbes Coaches Council. So with all of that, welcome to someone I hope I can call a friend, but definitely a colleague. Welcome, Mike. Oh, we don't hear you. Sabrina, can we? Oh, you're muted, Mike. There you are.
There you go.
I thought you did that just because every meeting has to start with, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, no. No, I was just sharing that it's a little embarrassing having Lida read your, autobiography, whatever, tell my story. When I got on LinkedIn back in late 2016, the first time when I was in my transition, you were teaching brand, you were teaching LinkedIn. You were one of the people that was kind of setting the standard for all of us. And there wasn't a large veteran community on LinkedIn at the time. So we had to look for people that knew what they were doing, taught about it, but also could speak to our community as well. And so, I can't believe the first time I met you was at the New York event, Vet Indexes event. And as soon as you offered to have me on here, I was like, yes, I'd love it.
Well,
so thank you.
Very, very honored to have you. And I know everyone is just really excited to hear what you have to say. You mentioned that you got on LinkedIn. What led you to joining LinkedIn, and what do you think has been your secret to success on the platform?
I think before I answer what got me into LinkedIn, I need to share a little bit about my background. So Sergeant Major, top 1%, like the 1% of the 1%. I mean, you don't make it to Sergeant Major very easily. Very few do. And most of my career, I was in the intel field. So I was actually teaching people not to get on social media for most of my career, as the old dinosaurs out there say, you can't be on social media. But a large portion of my career was spent overseas, and I was working with people. I was basically recruiting people to work for the United States. And, everything I do now was built in that experience. Because if you're going to go to another country and you're going to talk to people and you're going to recruit them to work for us, you have to understand motivations. You have to understand what drives them. You have to build a relationship. You have to find something in common. All of these things come to social media. And so when I started my transition, because I was planning on doing another 6 or 7 years, my former spouse said, I'm not moving. So suddenly I'm getting out in a year. And I went to this job fair ready to go, resume perfected, because I'm a little bit of a research nerd. My best suit, business cards, one pagers. I did research on every company, and I spoke to 41 recruiters in 6 hours, 41 companies, very, very like down the road, each one, notes, everything else like that. And they were doing interviews on site.
Mm-hmm.
Not a single request for an interview.
Hmm.
All I got was they looked at my profile, my resume, they circled my clearance and threw it on a pile and said, check our careers page and apply online. So as I'm like fighting my way through this job fair, and like, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm a sergeant major. Don't they know who I am? And yeah, they didn't. Recruiter number 40 was like, check our careers page, apply online. I'm like, no. Like, hey, come here. How do I follow up with you? And he was like, apply online. I'm like, no, like, I want to follow up with you. And he said, connect with me on LinkedIn. And I said, okay, I don't know what that is, but I'll write it down. and I put it on my list of do outs. And the next day, as I went through that, I went to get on LinkedIn, realized I need to create a profile. And I just started going through content, and it just made sense. Yeah. And I realized within a day or two that I had the ability to find people. Everything I'd done in my previous career, I had the ability to find people anywhere in the world that I had something in common with, and reach out and connect, and then share enough about myself so that a relationship starts to form, and that I could do that at scale. And by doing so, I had the access to all the information I needed to get myself right, to make myself a best candidate. And then with enough time, I had the ability to build a pool of mentors that would open doors for me when the time came for me to get out. And it made so much sense that it worked. And I'll be honest, I've been doing it ever since. It's cumulative. You know, you're investing social capital for when you need it. So every day I'm on LinkedIn doing something, and I don't need it very often. So it just keeps accumulating. You give it, you pay it forward.
You know, and interesting, because the conference that you referenced, the Vet Index, is where we met face to face. That one of the things that I remember about the conversation was how many of the hiring professionals were talking about the fact that they'll look at a resume, but then they always look at LinkedIn to learn more about the person, right? So there's this expectation that you're not just posting a resume onto LinkedIn. You're telling us more about who you are and what you care about. How do you navigate? I mentioned in the intro the line between authenticity and transparency, as I define it.
Yep.
How do you navigate that?
I mean, that's a learned. So I said I retired as a sergeant major. Sergeant majors are not known for being very gentle. I'm still a rip the Band-Aid off kind of guy. If someone's doing something wrong, I'd rather tell them they're doing something wrong, like straight up. It's not said with any anger, upset, or whatever, but like, hey, this is wrong. You should consider this. Go fix yourself. Let me know when you're done. And for people not in our community, maybe it's interesting. Some people love it. Some people don't love it. And that's okay, because it's authentic me. And I think that's what you were really getting to, is I found that my content, my posts, my engagement, my responses, my videos, I just share me, the authentic me. So I respond the way I respond. I post the way that I talk, and I engage the way that I want to engage with some guidelines. And that's where we stop the transparency part. You know, I realize that my guiding rule is don't post or engage on anything that you would not feel comfortable discussing with every person in your company, right? So if I don't feel comfortable discussing it with everyone in my company, if one person in my company I know would be like embarrassed or don't want to, or would piss them off, or they wouldn't feel comfortable, then it's not appropriate for social media, or appropriate for LinkedIn at the very least. And that's kind of what I try to live by.
Well, but you caught yourself and you said it wouldn't be appropriate for LinkedIn. Would you post it, for instance, on Facebook? So do you have different rules for how far you'll go on Facebook or Instagram than you will on LinkedIn?
No, I wouldn't. But there are YouTubers, influencers, I say it like this, out there that are become very successful on these platforms, doing just that. being hostile, being confrontational. Like I see on the other platforms that being confrontational, addressing topics that will divide half the country, can get you a lot of likes or dislikes and get you animosity or fame, right? You see it all over the time. And I think the key is I'm not looking for viral fame.
Right.
I'm not looking to be known because I do cat memes and people love them, right?
Cat memes.
I'm sharing who I do love cat memes, but not on LinkedIn. But I want to share my advice, my experiences, my insight, what we're doing to people with the end goal. I mean, ultimately, my goal has always been to prevent people from making the same mistakes that I did. Share my experience and knowledge so that it helps them not have to repeat them. And that's been, I wasn't born with common sense. I wasn't born knowing how to use LinkedIn. It's hard to say that. Yeah. I just never make the same mistake twice. And I think that's what I'm trying to help other people not have to make those mistakes.
Well, and I would add on to that, the platforms are all different. So Instagram, I do use Instagram more to show a more fun side of me. I might show more about my family or what I'm doing on the weekend, knowing that it is completely public, just like LinkedIn is. So to your point, if a client or the media was on LinkedIn assessing me and they went to Instagram, I don't ever want them to see somebody totally different and wonder which one is real. So you can use the platforms to show different sides of you, but they should all be authentic. And I love what you talked about. I'm a big proponent of guardrails, right? Setting your own boundaries. What won't you talk about? And then those just become your rules.
Yep.
But knowing how busy you are, I mean, I read that off and I'm exhausted thinking about how much you're doing. How do you find the time to engage with people on social media? Because you do it all yourself. Right. That's a lot. How do you find that time?
So let's define engage. Anyone that has a large presence on social media, any kind of public figure, gets to a point where you realize you can't answer everybody, that you have to learn how to triage your time. And we talked about this pre-show a little bit. So I had to get to a point where I felt comfortable knowing like, hey, I can't answer every message. I can't click on every tag. I can't respond to when everybody mentions me in a post. And, so that's one part of it. The other part is I try to post once a day. And I think one of the things that's really helped me build my brand, other people talk about the algorithm, and I really don't pay attention to data that much. I know that drives you a little nuts, but I like feel kind of guy. And most of the time I see these people come out with reports and I'm like, I already kind of knew that because I just pay attention to how posts are doing and what people are focusing on and things like that. So I post every morning. I love the scheduling tool now. So if I get some free time, in the evening and I don't have anything to do, or like a moment of clarity, I'll just get on and do a post, or I'll do a few videos and then I'll schedule them. Right. So that's one thing I do. And I just, I try to, when I have free moments in the day, I pull out my phone and I comment back to people, or, I send messages or whatever. I just I'm almost at the 30,000 cap. I'm like 29,800. I'm like fighting to not accept. Like I have to delete people to accept people.
Connections, you mean?
Right. Connection requests.
Right.
So you can only have up to 30,000 connections. So I don't have to worry about sending connection requests. I don't have to worry. I just have to worry about content and engagement pretty much. And that's what I've been focusing on. And I do have some members of my team, when people ask for like meetings or they want to talk about a business relationship and it seems legit, then I'll forward that to a member of my team to have them help schedule stuff. But I edit my own videos.
I know.
Right. I use the script. I love it. DESCRIPT. I don't get paid by them, or I pay them actually. But I do my own videos. I edit them myself. Like I type my own content. I share my photos and I engage in it. It's just, I wouldn't be where I am today without this. And there's no reason to stop. When we can build relationships at scale through this platform like we can, and no other platform lets you do it like this, I think that everybody should have a daily investment into building their brand.
Because there's so many reasons for it, right? It's not just for job seekers. When LinkedIn came out in 2003, that's really what it was. It was where you went to look for a job. So if you were on LinkedIn and your boss saw that, not a good sign. But today it is about collaboration and celebrating each other's success and sharing information and being generous, knowing that the return is always 2 to 10x of whatever you're going to give. I want to let people know too that Sabrina, who works with me, is dropping things into the chat. So make sure you check in there. There's some pieces by Hire Military. There's some articles I've written. She's throughout the conversation going to drop some things in the chat. How do you find inspiration? You talked about when you get those moments of clarity or you've got an idea. How do you find those? Or do they find you?
They find me. I know a lot of people, we talked about the angry engagement I had earlier today. And, you know, every engagement with people, I take something away. I speak to people, new people, several times a day, whether it's just a quick message back and forth, answering a question, or even sometimes hopping on a phone call if they come across the right way, or if there's somebody that I recognize their name because they've been engaging for time. They built some level of relationship and trust. Everything I do is experience driven. You know, I'm just sharing things that happen in my life. So if I attend an event, I just build it into the ecosystem, take a photo. I think tomorrow afternoon, I've got the Army General Officer Transition course where I get to speak to 20 amazing leaders and their spouses. I'm going to take a picture and I'm just going to share what I did and maybe tag a few of them because it could help them with their transition. You know, there will be a post that comes with my angry networking conversation we discussed earlier. Like I make a note. So what happens is, I think the thing is people don't realize you don't need to create content. You just need to document or share things that happen in your life. And so what I've gotten into the habit of, whenever I have an idea, whenever an event, if I didn't take a photo, if there's a question, a comment, anything like that, and I'm not in a place to post about it, I open up my notepad on my phone, scroll down to the bottom, and I write 5 or 6 words about what it was. And you know, that gives me a never-ending run of topics that are going to be of interest to my community because people keep asking, right? And so that's where I get the inspiration for my content. I will add one thing. I was really excited to learn this. I'm very direct in my responses and my posts, everything else like that. Last year, LinkedIn had a creator accelerator program that they asked me to be in the inaugural cohort, and to graduate, you needed to do one short form video, one video a week. And, you know, they forced me to get onto video. And what I found is that people can read. They read into your written text. They can read something that's not there. One word can point them in a whole different direction. But when they see your face, they see your voice, they see your passion. I see a lot of people saying, don't do video. It doesn't get as much views. And I'm like, well, number wise, maybe not, but the relationship and trust, the connection that builds from video can be so much more.
Well, and the intimacy to what you're saying, because you're speaking from your heart or you're speaking from your experience, and there really is no room for interpretation because it's your words coming from your mouth. And one of the things I sometimes will do is I'll think about the content and ask, is this better as a carousel? Is this better as a video? Is it better as just text? And then use the content sometimes to describe or to drive the medium instead of just saying, I got to record a video. What could I talk about?
Right.
But yeah, some of my best, I mean, I do car videos, stopped and parked, of course. But, you know, like when I'm leaving the Air Force Academy, or I'm just had an incredible client meeting and I just want to share that. And I think there's something about the authenticity of that moment that video can capture that text, being wordsmithed and edited and grammar checked, doesn't have the same quality to. How does your team support you? You mentioned you have a team and sometimes you'll send meeting requests to them. How else do they support you in all this?
I mean, so I have a social media manager, Olivia Perez-Breland, that runs our company page. And I have a senior marketing manager, Dave Kelly, that looks at things from different perspectives. So a lot of times we have a standing meeting every week where we'll talk about topics or posts I've scheduled, or I'll bring up things that I want to talk about that I'm not 100% sure that I should share. And I like to get their perspective before I touch any of those hot button items. And more often than not, they're like, like if you have to bring it up, better. I'm like, yeah, but I'd like to hear it from somebody else, or they'll give me a different perspective, or they'll remind me to mention hire military more often, because that's part of the business. It's part of the marketing and brand. But from my profile, aside from my team asking me to share roles, which helps, I have this huge network. My team is recruiting veterans, military spouses, and service members for these roles. For me to be able to share these opportunities for my network, like, that's a no-brainer. I can do that. I can share some things about our company or some of our partner companies, things like that. But for my profile itself, it's just me. The mass stuff that I'm doing is me sharing what I'm thinking about, what I'm experiencing, what I want to share, what I want to help. Now, from the company side, what a lot of people don't realize is what we've done differently than most is that we've built a huge brand for hire military on LinkedIn, all through organic content and outreach. So I think we have like 460,000 followers on LinkedIn, and we've never paid to promote content. And I hope LinkedIn's not listening, don't shut us down or anything, but I mean, and it's all based on a couple things. One, we pivoted from, originally I was doing it, but then hire military's voice came out with my voice.
Right.
And that's not good. So we have somebody else doing it with their voice, and they're accumulating the whole team's voice. So we're building trust, because some people may not resonate with me, but they resonate with Lucy or Kate or before, or somebody else on the team. So my social media manager, she's really helping to build the relationships of trust with the community. The other part is we train our team on how to use LinkedIn. So everyone in our company gets training on using LinkedIn. They can get certified on using LinkedIn if they want. We have a certification credentialing program. And because I'm doing it, because other senior leaders are doing it, they see what rights looks like, they want to get in on it. And what a lot of them realize is that they're building these massive brands because I'm clicking and engaging on their stuff. Hire military is clicking and engaging on their stuff. Our team is, and so not only is it making our corporate brand better, and that's why we've been able to grow so big as a brand for hire military, it's because our team is engaging on each other's stuff. Conversely, the hire military brand is helping to build theirs, just like mine. So I have a huge network, but the hire military team will comment on my stuff, sending it out to their network. So that engagement, continually, it's like reverberating and building trust.
And I know we have a lot of people in this program watching who are part of companies, right? So it's not their business. Like, my business is my name. Your company has a different name, so you can separate them a little. And for some people, it's their employer has nothing to do with them in terms of ownership. So what we're talking about, though, is being a brand extension, right? Being an extension of the brand. So for someone who's listening, we talked about this a little bit earlier, thinking that their boss or a hiring manager might be looking at their LinkedIn profile. What are some things they could do to really grow their value and voice if they're not the owner of the company, or, they're just trying to grow their career or maybe find a different job? What are some tips?
I mean, oh my God, you want them looking at it.
Yes, of course.
Right? I mean, that, like, the thing that alarms people is when there's a drastic change. All out of the blue, you start posting on LinkedIn, you put up the green banner. Maybe they're looking to leave. I share with people that probably the most successful thing I did when joining Ernst & Young, EY, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the world, is my first week. I connected with every senior manager, every director, every partner in my geographic area. The global CEO, the CEO of Americas. I made it a point every day to connect with like 20, 25 of them. And I just sent a message on LinkedIn. Like, I searched by, EY, title, location, and just went down the list, sending personal notes. Hey, first name, comma, I'm a new senior manager at EY. Excited to be here. Love to join your professional network. Almost every single one of them accepted. And then I just kept sharing, and I shared the veteran stuff. I shared the swag backs I got. I shared excitement. I shared some of the after events, like all the things that I would share with everybody, I shared. And what happened is every day, those decision makers in the firm saw my content. Yeah. Every day, it was like I bumped into them in the office and they saw something positive. And so it came to a point where we were at one of our big meetings, and one of the biggest partners in the firm greeted me like, "Hey, Mike, how's it going?" and the other senior managers around me are like, and I'm like, "Hey, I was surprised." And the other senior managers said, "Oh my God, how do you know them? How do they know you?" Right. Like, they were like, "What's the secret to your success?" I'm like, "I don't know. I guess they follow me on LinkedIn." And that was what it was. I built this community, this relationship with trust, because they never had to wonder what I was doing. And they saw me quick glimpses every day, something positive, that over time, if you bump into people multiple times in a short period of time and it resonates, trust forms. And so, I had so many opportunities that came from that.
And you personalized the connection request. I think so many people forget that simple step, and LinkedIn inserts itself and says, "Hey, if you send a personal note, you have a better chance." And unless you just met this person, where you don't need to say, "Hey, I literally left you 5 minutes ago," send a personal request and tell them why. I love, because I have, trainer and coach in my profile. I get a lot of people who personalize it to say, "As a fellow fitness trainer." And I'm like, yeah, not even close, right? So they try, that's not a personalized note, right? Because I'm not a fitness trainer. You didn't read my profile. But personalizing it goes to your, being a human being. The other thing that I see, and I'd love you to comment on, is sometimes people post too broad. So they talk about their hobbies and their interests and what they saw in the news and what their company's doing and what they did 10 years ago. So to your point, that senior executive is seeing them every day, but they're not getting a focused view on who that person is and what they can offer. What do you think about that?
I think it's a great point. There's a difference between being known and being known for something. So I may recognize your name, but if I have no idea what you do, I never think of you as a solution. I never think of you as someone that could solve a problem. When someone asks, like, if I have a need, I don't think to call you. And I see some of the people on social media that have amassed these huge followings. And I'm like, what do they do? I don't know. So I would never think of calling them. So I think you have to really, and this is part of it being a business platform. Like, I tell people, you must share some kind of personal content, because the personal side of things, sometimes videos, sometimes pictures, but sometimes a hobby or something, like on occasion, that will strengthen a relationship more than anything else. But ultimately, we need to see something professional from you. That's not an advertisement, not a job, something that makes us think of you. And that's your kind of your niche. And this is something I work really hard with on transitioning service members, recent veterans, about is they always want to do photos of like the retirement ceremonies and handing out coins and awards and fitness sessions. And I'm like, okay, that's great. I know you're a veteran. Thank you for your service. But what do I want to hire you for? Like, you say you're a project manager. I've never seen you mention a project or seen you solving, an issue related to a project. You say you're in human resources, but I never see you talking about, any of the programs you've implemented or successes your organizations have or challenges you overcome, and I can go straight down the line for every field. You've got to start sharing something that aligns with who you are as a professional. And it doesn't have to be refined at first. If you don't know, it's okay. But it can't just be this and this and this and this and this, right? Like, figure out like what your core things you're passionate about and start to share things like that and see how people engage on it. See if it connects and resonates. And over time, your message will refine itself if you're paying attention.
And I think to build on that, you and I both work in the military space, me as a civilian and a volunteer. And just even yesterday, I was teaching at the Air Force Academy in the TAP class. And as we're talking about sharing and being vulnerable and the realness on social media, I mean, this one gentleman, his face went white and he said, "You've got to be kidding me. Like, there's no way I can share that stuff." What would you say to someone like that? Because it's not just a military issue, being vulnerable and sharing who we are to these masses of people who are all over the world who are going to judge us. That feels terrifying. What would you say?
I think we have to define vulnerable.
Okay.
I'm not talking about necessarily getting on and crying. I'm not necessarily talking about, sharing your dating relationships or failures, like when it comes to personal life, stuff like that. Some of you can. I've seen some people, and I got to be careful about this topic, but I've seen some people overshare about some of their mental health issues, like very personal, very detailed. And I have to say, look, this is an important topic. We need to address mental health, but I'm a realist. And when you start posting about this and this and this and this and this, I get a lot of people are going to say, like, do I want to hire that person? Like, that becomes the core of what they're focused on. And so I think we have to define vulnerable. And I think it just like, it's got to go back to being authentic. Would you discuss that with your people in your organization? I share me and my team, we laugh about my failures sometimes. Sometimes we don't laugh about them, but I have plenty of them. So but we've created an environment where we can talk about this. And, I think you've got to really just be authentic and share the right content. And sometimes some of my best posts have been my failures, like sharing the things that happened earlier in my life to help shape who I am. That's been the most successful part.
Because people start cheering for you, right? And I think our fear is they're going to view us differently or see us as weak, right? So to a lot of people, vulnerable equals weak.
Right.
But it shows that we can get through it and you can get through it. You and I were talking and, two of my posts that have gone viral, if you will, are the ones where I go, okay, listen, I'm going to be real here. And I just do. And of course, people are judging me. We judge as human beings, but I don't think they're judging me negatively. I think it actually brought them closer to me because they said, I've kind of felt the same way. And thank you for sharing your story because now I think I can share mine or whatever. But we always retain the right to say, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's my trauma or it's my health concern or it's my relationship status, to your point. And being able to navigate that, sometimes it requires baby steps, wouldn't you say?
It would. And I will say that when we share some of our failures, we make ourselves more relatable and more human. You're not the what do they call it? Like the airbrushed supermodels on the magazines. I know they don't really have magazines. People make fun of how I even say magazines. So, but we're not, I see some of the presents on here that it's always like a glamour shot at an event, guys, gals, everything. But there's nothing to connect with. There's nothing that's human that makes me feel like I know them or like I care about them. And I think that being able to share that humanity, to share that you have had failures and that you've overcome them and this is how, like there's a learning point of it, not like, oh, this sucks, I did this. It's like, hey, I experienced this. This is what went through my life. This is what I went through. But ultimately I was able to get past it by doing this. I think a lot of people that see that say, okay, there's hope, or that's something that maybe I could use, or I'm going to keep that in case this happens to me. And I think that's really where it gets to. We have to be human. We've got to be relatable. We've got to build these relationships and trust. And that only comes from sharing some of that content, not all of it, some of it.
So when you talk about being relatable, that would almost infer then that you have to know who you're speaking to. So talk to us a little bit about your advice for finding the target audience that you want to build that relationship and that authenticity with.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said about the people saying they see you're a coach, and they say also, I see you're a fitness coach.
Yeah.
So the number one thing is, there's a difference. You don't have to send a connection request if you're just trying to grow your network and you're just kind of like feeling lazy. You can just hit connect, and some will accept if they see enough profiles put together. But that's not the optimal way to build relationships, right? So the first thing I would say is, it has to appear like you actually wanted to reach out to them. So you have to look at their profile, right? Like actually look at their profile and find some topic in common, something that you can relate with, some thread that ties you together that you can highlight early in the message that will start to form the relationship. So if hey, I somebody reaches out and it's just like, I noticed you're the CEO of Hire Military. We'd like to help you do LinkedIn better. And I get these, and I'm like, oh like really? Like you tried to sell me LinkedIn training? Like you didn't even look at my profile. But if it's someone that reaches out and says, hey, I noticed that you were a sergeant major here. I am a sergeant major doing this, or I'm a service member doing this, or whatever. It's a more personal note. There's a much better chance highlighting that up front. And then the next piece for outreach is, I'm trying to get people to not start with a heavy ask. Like not, can I send you my resume, or here's my resume? Not, can you get me a job? Right. Not, can we hop on a call for an hour and so I can pick your brain on the transition? Like, I don't just have a free hour for strangers. I have a business, I have my outreach, I have my workshops and webinars. I've got 2 small kids, I've got exercise, and, like, for me to carve out an hour for an unfocused discussion is not going to happen unless I know the person. And so I tell people otherwise, it's to just connect before you need anything, engage on their stuff, send them a note every once in a while, share stuff yourself, and give the relationship a chance to form. Give it so that maybe they've seen you a few times, you've engaged a few times before you ask. And then there's always this like degree slope of, easy asks first before you get to the high stuff. So if I'm not going to accept your connection request, I'm certainly not going to review your resume. Right? Now, so that's the other piece of this.
Well, it is social networking. And if you think about it, you talked about going to job fairs when you were coming out of the military. We go to networking events or meetings. Would you really walk up to a stranger, someone who may be an influential person, and not even introduce yourself, but just say, would you look at my resume? Or can I get an hour of your time? Like, you wouldn't do it in person, but we feel like we can do it online.
Yeah, honestly, I think you just hit on the key component of everything I do. Social media and everything I try to teach is everything's in the scope of in real life. If you wouldn't do it to my face, based on the number of times we've interacted, don't do it on social media. It's not an easy button, right? So I do tell people to think about that in real life aspect, and to really, start small, build the relationship. Ideally, you're doing this before you need anything. Because networking is building relationships. If you're instantly like, review my resume, do you have a job for me or whatever, it's sales.
Absolutely. That's not networking.
and nobody likes a cold pitch. Nobody likes hey, I'm reaching out to you because I want something. Like, that doesn't make you feel like you care about me or anything that's important to me or my organization or my team. It's, hey, I'm using some kind of tool so I can try to sell you something. That's not networking. So ideally, you're networking early, sharing enough about yourself, building relationships at scale, so that I go back to the social capital. You're investing into relationships. You're investing into trust. You're investing into your brand over time so that when you need something, it's there. Or ideally, people need something and they think of you.
So I want to add a follow-up question to kind of a few things we've talked about. I live in the world where a lot of my clients have reputation crisis, and we know that cancel culture is real. It's impactful. We've got some folks with some really big brands that are participating today. And we don't, as an employee, ever want to make a mistake that's going to hurt our employer,
Mhm.
but we also don't want to hurt our personal brand.
Right.
What are some tips or questions that you ask around the idea of avoiding a reputation landmine and
Right.
ending up in a cancel culture situation?
So, I mean, so you're never, it's kind of interesting. You're never going to fix a reputational crisis, cancel event by saying, I'm not that, right? So, like, if it starts to go that direction and you engage on it and you say you're wrong, or you post about it and say you're all wrong or whatever, you're like fanning the fire, right? I used to say back in my day, it was like the junior rapper, the new on the scene rapper picking a fight with the big rapper. They get the free publicity and everything else like that. So for me, and again, I'm a by feel kind of guy, it's got to be relationship driven. You can't tell people that you're not this. You have to show them. So I've had some events that have kind of sideways impacted me and my company over, as with anything, anybody that's got this much of an online presence.
Right.
And I think the key is I share enough of my life and enough of the time that I volunteer that people look at it and go, yeah, that's not them. I a lot of people don't like, I volunteer at HBCUs, because it's a topic that's very important to me. And it's my way of giving back to the community. I've written articles to support them. I teach, a lot of disadvantaged communities, and most of my webinars, and a lot of them are all volunteer to just trying to give back to the community. So I think if you address this because you're sharing enough of who you are,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't take hold the same way.
In other words, you're building context, right? So you're showing me who you are, and then one mistake or one ill-fated post, it has more context to live in. That's typically how I would teach it. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah.
That, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, I'm sure you have haters. And I don't know why people would hate you, but you have a large presence. And when you get successful, people are like, oh, why is it them? Why isn't it me or whatever? And I saw the look on your face, so I'm sorry to bring that news to you, but it's not anybody on my team. My whole team loves you. But whenever you're a public figure, there are going to be people in this world that don't.
Right.
It doesn't resonate. I don't like it. Why is it them? They're too polished. They're too fake. Whatever it is.
Right.
And so you've got to learn to deal with that. And I think you deal with it by one, you don't feed the trolls. Mm-hmm. And by two, sharing enough, getting into the habit of sharing enough that people already feel like they know who you are. And the trolls, the angry, the cancel culture doesn't take hold because that's just somebody reading it differently. That's just somebody trying to cause something. Mm-hmm. Like, I like this. And I was going to go into another, I'll skip that topic about my advice to certain beverage manufacturers. So we'll move on. But I mean, ultimately the goal is to build relationships and trust at scale with your desired community. And I think that's what, if you are consistently doing it, if it's authentic from a company or an individual standpoint, you can kind of weather those storms.
Well, and I think, sometimes it's not even just you that will mm-hmm. battle for you, right? I'm mm-hmm. sure if you posted something and it was as outspoken and direct as you are, and somebody took offense to it, probably by the time you even got back to it, you would have had a whole bunch of other people going, look, that's Mike. And if you don't like it, just click to the next person. I've been challenged on why 3 of my books are for the military and a veteran has to buy them. I said, well, because it's kind of expensive to produce a book and I don't want to become a nonprofit. But before I can even form a response, the veteran community will come together and go, dude, it's $20. Right. And they'll send you one if you really can't afford $20. So and that's what I mean about surrounding yourself with enough context that people know what's in your heart. They know who you are. So one person, like you said, that comes in from the side, it doesn't take foothold, as you said.
Exactly. And can I just add, even if you were a nonprofit, you'd still have to raise money from somewhere to pay for the books.
That's true.
So it doesn't, I think that's one thing we're so used to in the military is not thinking about money, not thinking about where the money comes from. And so a lot of our transitioning service members, recent veterans, need to get business acumen. You know, it's not fair for them to ask you. I mean, I can't think of how many hours you invested in writing the book, and then editors and copyrights and covers, and then publishing, you know, the book. Like, that's a lot of effort. And for anybody to expect that for free is unfair, right? So, and I deal with that with my speaking engagements. Like, you want me to fly across the country and spend a day speaking to your team, and you want me to pay for it all myself? Like, what about my company that's paying my salary? Like, what do you mean? Well, like, I have to count for my hours to my company, and each hour there's an hourly rate. You got to at least cover that. Otherwise, you're asking my company, responsible for a lot of livelihoods, to pay for me to come teach you. And I think that's something that makes us, if we can pick up that business acumen, that's something that makes us so much more marketable on the outside.
Amazing. I know we're going to have time for questions. I want to wrap up this part so that we have time. I see some questions have come in, and I know Sabrina's capturing those, and she's been putting links to your newsletter in the chat, and we've got some great resources in there. I always wrap these up with some action items, things that anyone watching, or if you're watching the recording, you can start doing right now based on what we talked about. So the first action item is, think about the long game, right? Mike talks about, you know, this isn't about a quick fix. This isn't an immediate hit. You're curating, you're planting seeds, you're nurturing online relationships. So as you post, think about creating a strategy for the long haul. The second is, find a way to filter yourself. Your online reputation is so powerful. And as Mike suggests, ask yourself before you post, would I feel comfortable saying that same thing to the CEO of the company, or to the recruiter I'm trying to get the attention of, to my mother, right? Would you feel comfortable sharing that? That's a great technique. Number 3 is start engaging. Even if you make a goal once or twice a day, twice a week, get on LinkedIn, respond to people, comment, share, post, start engaging, set a metric for yourself. I had a client recently, and she set an alarm on her phone every morning at 9 o'clock because she actually found that was a good time for her. She's not US based, and that seemed to hit a lot of her target audiences. And every morning at 9 o'clock, the alarm went off, and she would go on LinkedIn and find something to comment or post about. And then the last one, and this is my ad, is leverage gratitude. You know me, I'm a big fan of gratitude, and find one person every day on LinkedIn that you can say thank you to. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that, Mike. I really appreciate how you showed me a different way of thinking. Or thank you for adding this article because I never would have found it. Find every day somebody to thank on LinkedIn. Small gestures, big impact. Yeah. We're going to get to questions. I also want to let everyone know we have some amazing guests coming up in the fall. So I want you to start marking your calendars for this as you start thinking about those questions. Go ahead and put them in the chat. But in September, I've got Jolie Miller, who's a dear friend of mine. She's Director of Business and Content Strategy at LinkedIn. So you want to know how LinkedIn works? Jolie's the person. We're going to be talking about women in leadership and how to really grow our voice. In October, I've got Sarah Blancett, also a dear friend, Vice President of Military.com. I've been writing for Military.com for 11 years. Sarah has been my touch point. We're going to talk about effective communication. And then in November, Mike, I actually got to know him at the conference we were at, is Bobby Thompson, who's Director of Operations for Beezer Homes. And we're going to be talking about executive presence. So mark your calendars for those events coming up in the fall. And let's just jump into some questions. Sabrina, who would we hear from first? Oh, Danielle. Hi, Danielle. Danielle is a huge advocate of military, global military. People trust and build relationships. Yeah, we're people talking to people. Yeah. What would you add to that? That's a great comment.
I mean, a lot of people think that success in the workplace is going in and just doing your job and quietly doing your job. And that doesn't get you promoted. It doesn't get you new opportunities. It doesn't get you on the team. So one of the biggest things about finding success in the Big Four isn't just being on a contract. It's building your relationships across the firm with people that are decision makers, people that are going to get new contracts, people that are going to be supporting your contracts. And so I say for every company that you're in, there is a personal relationship, there's a trust, and there's a brand component that needs to be taken into account. And I think that for a lot of us, we just have to be intentional about building those relationships in an organization. And I will tell you, it becomes even more important in the very, very big organizations. You need to have mentors, and then you also need to have sponsors.
Yeah.
And for people who don't realize the difference, a mentor is someone that'll give you advice. A sponsor is someone that's going to put their name on the line. Sponsor is somebody that's going to speak for you when you're not in the room. And you don't get those unless you're building relationships at scale.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Do we have another, Sabrina? We're getting a lot of positive comments. Thomas says, showing our humanity on social media is very important for transitioning service members, including senior NCOs and senior officers who may have spent the latter portion of their careers being rough, tough, and gruff when around their troops. Thoughts on that?
Some would say I'm still gruff, at least. I don't know if I've ever been rough and tough. I was intel, so I wasn't that rough and tough. I remember somebody sent me a video a couple months ago, and it was a retired first sergeant or sergeant major, and they still were like wearing their drill sergeant hat, and they were like, "Listen up, young ho," and they were still talking Army speak. Yeah. And I think that can resonate with some people that are still in, potentially, that are used to seeing that every day. But it would not resonate to people outside of the military. And I think we just have to remember who we are. It's okay to share that rough, tough side of things, but I will, for the 94% of the population that never served, they get all their information on the military from TV. Every bad thing that happens that they were a veteran, they're like, veteran shoots 3 people. I'm like, they did 2 months in 74. Yeah. Like, it's just veteran, movies, cartoons, I can't tell you the last time I saw a movie or a TV show that was just like a positive story about veterans. And I teach all the admirals, and they all want to say Top Gun Maverick was the last one. I'm like, you realize that Maverick had to steal a jet to prove he could potentially save those 8 lives. Like, the admiral was like, they can die. It's going to be for the greater good. And they all look at me like, I'm like, but you got to understand, like, Maverick was from the Navy. Maverick was the bad guy. Yeah. But for the world, he was the good guy. And so we have to realize that people that never served have perceptions based on the content they're consuming. And we have to do something to kind of soften that a little bit and show them that we're learning and growing.
And I think what's safest, if you will, about LinkedIn is it doesn't have that expectation like a Facebook or Instagram or even some of the other more social platforms. It feels safer to share just a little bit of your authenticity. So for someone like Thomas was indicating, someone who's really afraid of letting people kind of know who they are, it's a better place to start that process, because the expectation isn't that you're going to tell me all these casual social things about you. But to your point, it can't all be business all the time.
And can I add, the one thing that I think is powerful about LinkedIn is you can choose your audience, right? So for a lot of veterans, I say start off networking with veterans, like reach out and connect with 300, 500 veterans and start sharing your content, because a lot of them will become mentors and they'll reach out and speak to you and say, hey, like, maybe that wasn't a good idea or whatever. And it's a great way to kind of find yourself in a safe place before you expand your network far beyond the veteran community. And a lot of people miss that element of being able to largely define your audience. I'm in a very niche audience. You say 374,000 followers, the vast majority of those are veterans, right? So there are people that have a lot more followers than me that don't get the same kind of engagement because they've just gotten everyone around the world. And I think that we can start to be authentic and decide who we want to invite into our network first and grow from there.
I would just caution that it's still public if
Yes,
you share
yes.
it. So
Yes, of
don't
course.
think that recruiter, that hiring manager can't see those. I mean, I have seen people post about a bad interview experience they had, and they're naming the company. It's like, no, everybody can still see that. So it's not cone of trust.
Yes.
We have to manage that. Well, any last thoughts? Anything you want to leave us with before we get, I know how busy you are. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but anything that we haven't covered that you want to mention?
No, I think the only thing I'll say is I have some homework I give to transitioning service members to start early. And some people just like to have some kind of a checklist to kind of build their brand over time. And so what I encourage people to do is my 10-5-3 rule. Is so every day connect with 10 people. Like, be intentional. Think about where you have gaps in your network, where you want to go. Search for those people, send out 10 connection requests. That's like a couple minutes. Every day, comment on 5 posts, because you're connecting with these people. Their content's going to come around your feed. You're going to connect on the things that resonate with you. That's going to start to form relationships. And then every week, post 2 to 3 times. You know, it's not a huge investment. You can grab a photo, an image, share an article, a thought, whatever. Share something 2 to 3 times a week, because then that's going to start pulsing your network and create these touch points. And I tell people that's like a 5 to 10 minute investment every day. And what you'll see is over the course of a year, we talk about the long game. Over the course of a year, you'll have thousands of new connections, hundreds of new relationships. And if you're doing it realistically, you'll be known for something, because you'll have posted, you know, better part of 1,000 to 1,500 times. You'll refined your message over the course of a year. So that's all I'd say. And then just, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I will continue to follow you.
Well, thank you. Yay. Thank you to everyone who has watched. Join us next month. I'll announce the guest speaker next month soon, but be sure to mark your calendar for those fall speakers that I mentioned. They're going to have some fabulous conversations that really build on topics like this. Thank you to Mike Quinn and the team at Hire Military, who are just outstanding and exceptional. Cannot say enough good things. And we wish you all a healthy and safe rest of your day. Bye.